Hello, friends and fellow stargazers. Today's discussion is going to focus on job loss or job layoff and how we can see and review this in the chart. We're going to specifically look at houses, transits, nakshatras, dasas, and then pull it all together with a chart example. My name is Tahia. Welcome to the light where software meets the stars. I'm a Vedic astrologer and educator here to bring you tips and tutorials on Parashara's Light 9.0. Let's jump into the light. I'm going to start the discussion by first looking at how all 12 houses can be impacted during a job loss. Obviously, there are some houses that are impacted more than others, but let's pause, take a step back, and review how each house is impacted before we go into specifics and details of the major houses that are impacted. So the first and most obvious house is the first house. It's ourself. During any type of job loss, the most immediate impact to the news is to ourselves, whether it's mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, a combination of all of the above. Our entire constitution is impacted. How we process this job loss is also seen through this house. Our life is filtered through this house, so this is where the immediate impact of a job loss is seen. The second house is our immediate sense of security and resources, and this is our paycheck. Whether it's daily, weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, whatever it is, this is impacted. The third house is our teammates and our colleagues. And another reminder, I am just discussing this under the context and umbrella of a job loss. This is also the house of conflict. This is the house of communication. The fourth house is where you sit. So whether you work remotely, whether you're in an office, in a cubicle, whatever it may be, this is impacted as well because now you are going to lose that seat. The fifth house, being the house of advisors, is your mentor. So whether you had one or not, or in the process of getting one or had one for years, you can see how this is impacted. Another thing I want to point out here is the fifth house is 8 from the 10. So let's pause and look at this concept a little bit. The eighth house is the natural house of things dismantling, falling apart, ultimately leads to some sort of transformation, even though it doesn't seem like that at the immediate moment. The fifth house is one area where you can consider when you have Saturn, the nodes, Jupiter, any slower moving planets that's passing through this house, the Dasha of this house, the Lord of the fifth house can impact your current standing. This I've learned more through readings and practice, where the eighth house from any house is usually when there is some sort of interruption or dismantling of the house. The sixth house is the natural house of work. This is also where you can have a lot of friction with your colleagues, commonly known as enemies. It's also litigation. When there's a job loss, especially like a layoff, litigation can be involved from severance contracts and the like. Now, the seventh house, not only being other people, but remember the seventh house is your mirror. So this can often be destabilizing because this is where you are forced to confront yourself. So transits to the seventh house, the Dasha of the seventh house, yes, it can be about a partner, whether that's romantic or business, but on a broader, more out of the box level, this is about how you confront yourself because the relationships that you once had are now not aligned anymore. As this change occurs, not only are the people around you going to change, but how you face them is going to change as well. The eighth house is the natural house of changes, as we talked about. It's where there can be downfalls, humiliations, because this is a house of surrender. In this situation, this is where you have to surrender yourself to what you were doing on a daily basis. The ninth house was your immediate boss or manager. So this is the person you reported to. And for obvious reasons, this has changed. The 10th house, of course, is what we're looking at as the career. Your purpose is now changing. Your purpose was to have this job as part of your daily living and daily functioning. And now that purpose is changing. And you almost have to repurpose yourself in how you're going to situate yourself moving forward. The 11th house is the house of gains and also networking. So networking in this sense can be the actual concept of networking with your colleagues, but it can also be networking, for example, with other departments, with third-party vendors. And your 12th house is your natural house of loss. So that's an overview of how all 12 houses are impacted during a job loss. Also, remember, traditional and classical Jyotish can speak in extremes because things like survival was very fragile, family structures were rigid, and any type of disruption was dangerous. There was a very different paradigm of how we looked at life. How we're living today has a different lens and looking glass that we have to examine. Now let's look at specific houses. And we're going to look at the first, the fifth, sixth, 8, 10, and 12. So you can see that's still a lot of houses, but at least we've narrowed it down to about looking at half the houses now. We look at the first house, notice that it is 8 houses from the sixth. 8 houses from the natural house of our daily working. Anytime we have transits of Saturn, Jupiter, Rahu, Ketu, or even a retrograde Mars, because a retrograde Mars, especially in the sixth house, can cause some ups and downs along with the other planets I just mentioned. And yes, even Jupiter, if Jupiter is not a good planet for your ascendant, it can cause some turmoil. The other thing to look for is also transits to your house cusp. So, what is a house cusp? A house cusp is the degree that the ascendant starts with, and you would look at that same degree in subsequent houses. So, what do I mean by this? And I'm just going to show you a quick example of what I mean by house cusp. You can see in this example, the ascendant is at 2115 of Aries. I'm going to show you how you can see this in the other houses. So we're going to right click, go to advanced display options, click on show house cusps. You can also put this on the border. So I'm going to show you what this looks like both on the border and in the chart. I'm going to click up here under chart border where it says show house cusp. And now you can see this in 2 ways. You can see right here, the number 2, it's showing you the house cusp is at 21 degrees in Taurus. In the third house, we see the house cusp is at 21 degrees. We see in the fourth house, it's at 21 degrees, and so on. You can also see on the border for each house what the house cusp is. Now let's take a look at what this looks like on the South Indian. So we're going to right click. And we're going to go to South Indian. And you can see it actually looks a little cleaner on the South Indian. But you can see here we've got the ascendant at 21 in Aries. And then we've got the second house cusp at 21 degrees of Taurus. And you can see it's also in the border up here. And if you keep kind of going around the clock, you'll see the house cusp is listed. I'm going to go back to the North Indian style. And let's talk a little bit about why it's important to look at house cusps. It's important because it marks the actual beginning of the house, the point where the area of life becomes activated most directly. When you're looking for predictive work, opportunities or challenges, especially with transits and transits of the house lords, planets crossing or closely aspecting a cusp often coincide with more of a tangible event or some sort of noticeable shift. So, when we're analyzing something like a job disruption, transits to the Dasha Lord or the House Lord of the first, fifth, eighth, 10th, and 12th can be particularly important in understanding why an event happened and also foreseeing if the event would happen. Okay, going back to looking at specific houses, we covered the first house. And just to recap, that is 8th from the 6th. So a natural disruption to how you are going to experience life moving forward. The fifth house, this is 8th from the 10th, transits to the house cusp, transits in the fifth house, transits of the Dasha Lord, the Lord of the fifth house, can also stir the pot with career disruption. One thing I have seen over and over again is the Lord of the fifth house, when it's transiting at a 0 degrees or 29 degrees, especially in a retrograde motion, can disrupt the 10th house. The sixth house is your natural house of work. Anytime there is a job loss, a movement in position, the sixth house is impacted. impacted. The eighth house, under all contexts, is the house of investments, other people's money. So the eighth house is impacted because this is your payout, whether it's some sort of severance package, money that's owed to you from the company, etc. Your 10th house is impacted because this is where the major shift occurs in your long-standing purpose. The 10th house represents your role in the organization or your company. It's your responsibilities, reputation, contribution, the direction you're moving in. So when the 10th house becomes afflicted, disrupted, or activated by difficult transits, dashas, or cuspal triggers, what's being shaken up is not just your employment, but your sense of purpose, momentum, and public identity. Your 12th house is the natural house of loss in this circumstance. Now we're going to look at an example, and we're going to look at the chart of Steve Jobs. And as we all know, he was the co-founder, CEO of Apple. And the event we're going to look at is when he was fired/left Apple in September 1985. And even though this was 40 years ago, this is actually a great chart for teaching and demoing to show the concept of job loss and dismissal based on what we discussed, because it's a very clean example. I also want to walk you through two related worksheets to see the specific event. So a little bit about Steve Jobs. He was born February 24th, 1955 in Cupertino, California in the United States. He died on October 5th, 2011 in Palo Alto, California. And the event we're looking at is when he was fired and left Apple on September 16th, 1985. What makes this chart really fascinating is that it's not just a job loss, it's an actual dismantling of identity, status, authority, and creative control, which are the classic themes tied to 10th house and transformational activations. Some quick facts about Steve Jobs. He was adopted. His birth parents were not married when he was born and gave him up for adoption. His birth father is Syrian. He dropped out of college after one semester and went to India, backpacked across the country, lived in ashrams and temples. And it was from his ashram life and the simplicity of things that actually influenced his obsession with clean, minimalistic design and lines. And as we all know, he helped launch products that reshaped modern technology and is known for being intensely and insanely visionary, demanding, and unconventional. Let's move into the astrology. And before we jump into the event analysis, I want to say a few things about his birth chart. He is a Leo rising, which is the classic sign of leadership, authority, and creative control. His ascendant is at 29 degrees. And when you have an ascendant at the very end or beginning of a sign, you always want to confirm the birth time, because as you can see, it can quickly move into the sign after or the sign preceding, which will change the entire blueprint of the chart. His ascendant is in the nakshatra of Uttara Falguni, which is the second pair of the Falgunis, the former being Purva Falguni. Uttara Falguni is symbolized by the hind legs of a bed or a cot, which is all about a really strong desire for stability and supporting others. The deity ruling Uttara Falguni is Aryaman, which is the god that governs sacred agreements that hold society together. Contracts, marriage, mutual support, and friendships. This is also the god famous for leadership, honor, and nobility. And it does lie between Leo and Virgo. And in this case, we're looking at it in Leo. It's ruled by the sun, so this is about leadership and having some sort of worldly path. Another point about this nakshatra, people in this nakshatra tend to have a personality to deal with crisis well, because ruled by the sun, they have the ability to almost cut off anything emotional to be able to really hone in and focus on the situation at hand, which makes them great advisors. The other thing to note is that the Lagna is in the first pada of Uttara Falguni, which is in the Navamsha of Sagittarius, which is the fifth house for Leo rising. So you can see there's going to be a strong focus on this individual, not just on creativity, but having complete creative control over whatever he is making. Let's move to the moon. The moon is in the eighth house in the sign of Pisces in the nakshatra of Uttara Bhadrapad, which is also the second pair of the Bhadrapads, the former being Purva Bhadrapad. And this is symbolized by the hind legs of a funeral cot. People in this nakshatra tend to be very drawn to expanding their consciousness beneath the obvious. They have a lot of psychological gravity that pulls them inwards and are kind of an old soul. The deity for this nakshatra is Ahir Badanya, and this is the serpent under the sea. And this is about compressing your consciousness and subconsciousness inward. These people have an amazing ability to endure emptiness and what's under the surface. The moon is in Uttara Bhadrapad Pada 4, which is the Scorpio Navamsa, which creates a mind that's always drawn to some sort of transformative philosophical consciousness. So it's all about what's beneath the surface. What's really interesting here is that both his nakshatra of his Lagna and his moon are about supporting structures, but at different levels of consciousness. So Uttara Falguni is about building structures on an external level. Uttara Bhadrapad is knowing that all structures eventually will dissolve. So someone like himself with the ascendant in Uttara Falguni is somebody who outwardly participates in the world, builds systems, forms structures, but inwardly feels very detached from worldly permanence and is very well aware of the impermanence beneath appearances and the surface. The other thing I want to note is that the sun, the ascendant ruler, is in the seventh house. It's also in the sign of Aquarius, ruled by Saturn. If you know Hindu lore, you'll understand that because Saturn is the son of the sun, at a broader level, there is just a struggle with authority. So you can see kind of from the beginning, it's already baked in the chart. There is some sort of resistance and challenges with authority. Interestingly enough, too, the sun, which is the Karaka for father, is in the nakshatra of Satabisha, ruled by Rahu. And if you recall, his birth father is Syrian, which is foreign to who he is. Now let's move to the event of interest. There's two ways to get to the transit worksheet. You can click on charts and click on animated transits. You can also click on the fifth icon from the left, and this brings up a table, and under charts, you can click on animated transits. And what we're going to do here to see the actual event is go to edit date. And this pulls up another little pop-up window, and you can enter the date of the event here. And the date of the event was September 16th, 1985. And this is in the US date format. Click OK. And now you can see the transits for that date pop up here. I'm going to just click this out, and you can see the information about the birth chart, the transits, and then I usually like to keep the transits of the Navamsha here. If you want to look at this outside of the circle wheel, you can right-click, click on North Indian. You can get that in the North Indian format. If you prefer it in the South Indian, right-click, click on South Indian, and it's going to pop up in the South Indian form. I'm going to go back to the default, which is the circle chart. So that's one way to look at this event. If you want a really quick glance of what's going on that day and compare it to your birth chart. The other way we can look at this is to go to the events worksheet. And we get that from charts and clicking on events 1 to 10. And you can see here, I've already created this, but this is what the events worksheet looks like. And you can have different tables here that represent the transits for that event from the Lagna, the moon. I've customized this to add the birth chart, the transits from the Navamsha, and then planetary information of each planet that was going on for that day. So what I'm going to do now is actually show you how I created this template. I'm going to go back to the birth chart just so it doesn't get confusing. And what we do is go to edit and click events. And this is where you would add whatever event you want to look at. I've already created that, so I'm going to delete it, not to cause confusion. And now I'm going to click on add event. And you can see that pops up as new event. And we're going to call this fired again. And the date of this event was September 16th, 1985. I don't know the time of this event. I tried looking it up. I couldn't find it. So I'm just going to say 12 noon like that. And this was in Cupertino, California in the United States. And we're going to click OK. Now we're going to go back to charts, go to events where it says 1 to 10, and you'll see that event came up here. You can keep adding events. And if you have more than 10 events, this grayed out area here will become highlighted and you can click to the next section. Now I'm going to show you how to create this from scratch. So what I'm going to do is go back to events and you'll see it pulled up the worksheet properties table. I'm going to click on the first field here called restore/clear fields and screens. And I'm going to reset this to the original. I'm not going to clear all fields because I don't want to lose everything. I want to keep some of these tables. And I don't want to click on reset all because that's going to click all my other worksheets, including this, to the factory default. So I'm going to click on reset to original. And now you can see this is the original default screen that comes with Parashara's Light before you customize or personalize it. I'm going to actually keep this top box and the events from the Lagna and the moon. What I'm going to change is Kakshas, which is part of the Ashtagavarga system, Gochara data, which is the Pachanga for the day, Shadbala, which is planetary strengths, and Vimshopaka, which is planetary strengths across all the Vargas. Now, if you need all this information and feel this is going to help you, by all means, keep it. I just want to show you how to change it, whether you use what I use or whether you just want to customize it to your liking. So the first thing we're going to do here is double click in the space. And you can see the chart and table selection pops up. And you see there's 4 columns. The very first column under table, you see Kakshas is selected. We're going to scroll up. And we're going to click on chart. And we're going to click on birth chart because I want to add the birth chart here so I have a reference point. I'm going to click OK. And now we see the birth chart pops up. I like to have this on this screen because I like to reference the birth chart when I look at the event versus going back to charts and clicking on birth chart. It just keeps everything consolidated on one screen. Same for here. I'm going to double click and you can see Vimshopaka was selected here. Again, I'm going to click on chart. I'm actually going to leave this on Gochara and transits because I want to see the transits for the Navamsha on that day. So I'm going to leave this the same and I'm going to change this to Navamsha. And now you can see the Navamsha came up, but this is for today. I want to see what it was on the day of the event. So I'm going to click right here and you see the event list table pops up. I'm going to click on fired because that's what I want to see the transits in the Navamsha for that day. And you can see that pops up. I also want to change this table. So I'm going to click on this and instead of Gochara data, I'm going to scroll and I'm going to add house cusp details. And you can see the house cusp details showed up. What you can also see is that it's sort of spilling over. And that's because the house cusp details takes up 1 row and 2 columns. So what I'm going to do to compress this into 1 column is I'm going to double click again. And at the very bottom, select this drop down and click on 1 by 1. And now you see this got compressed so it fits a little bit cleaner into 1 column. The last thing I'm going to do here is change this. And instead of the Shadbala score graph, I want the planetary information for that day. I'm going to leave this on Gochara and leave these 2 as is. Click OK. And now you can see I have planetary information for the transits on that day. You can see that it spills over. And if we try to do what we did with the house cusps table, click on 1 by 1, it still cuts it off. And I'm okay for the purposes of this demo just to keep this as is, even though it's a little bit cut off. Let's start our analysis and let's hone in on the Dashas, which is at the very top. You can see that he is in a Venus Sun Dasha. And before you even start looking at the chart, take a step back and logically think. Venus is beauty, creativity, love, relationships. The sun is authority, leadership, control. And the very company he created became the place where he lost his authority. And remember, the sun is a malefic. The sun is a burner. Very simplistically here, there's going to be some sort of severing of a relationship and creativity. Also note, in the birth chart, Venus is in the 5th house of creativity. And note, because the sun is in the 7th house, the authority actually was not his. It belonged to other people making decisions about him. So the authority actually sat with other people. like board members, executives, and stakeholders. This was an intense period of a power struggle. Let's move on to the transits for that day. As you can see, we've got Mars and Mercury in the ascendant. Mars and Mercury are enemies. This is a classic combination for arguments, friction, a lot of impulsivity in action. And being in the first house, this is just going to cause people to say impulsive things. The other thing I wanted to say was the day before, the sun was at 29 degrees of Leo. As you can see on the day of event, it moved into Virgo and it's at 0 degrees. Venus is also at 29 degrees, as so is Saturn, which I'll talk about in a bit. So this is to say the day before he had 3 planets in the ascendant, and the day after, he's also going to have 3 planets in the ascendant. Anytime that you have 3 or more planets in the ascendant, it's like cleaning house. It's like sweeping through your first house in which the old you kind of needs to die for a new you to be born. So think of it that way. It's literally like a rebirth. Mars is in the nakshatra of Maga, and it's in the Navamsa of Cancer, where it's debilitated. And Cancer is the 12th house for Leo rising. So there's an intense feeling of some sort of loss here. Mercury is in Purva Falguni and is in Pada 4 for Scorpio Navamsa. And as you can see here, Scorpio is the 4th house. So it's literally like he was stripped from his seat. If you recall, the 4th house in a job loss is where you were sitting. This is literally him getting dethroned, and also how it was communicated to him was probably pretty rough and intense. Also notice Rahu is aspecting the ascendant. Rahu is Maya or illusion. So we can say again, it's like the rug being pulled out of him. You'll notice there's a Paravatana yoga between the 1st and 2nd house. So there's a strong connection between identity and how security is being impacted. The sun transiting the 2nd house in Virgo with the moon is also going to add an emotional aspect to financial organization, budgeting, practical decision making, and more than anything, reassessing, reevaluating what provides stability, security, and resources. The sun is at 0 degrees. The house cusp is at 29 degrees. When there are planets that are at the house cusp or right near there, it can often materialize or transpire into an event. Technically, the sun has just crossed the house cusp and entered the next house by degree. So we're right at the threshold between 2 areas of life. The 2nd house is also aspected by a debilitated and retrograde Jupiter in the 6th, which compromises any type of guidance and resources from the workplace that have to directly deal with resources and security. And remember what I said, the 2nd house for a job loss is your paycheck. The 3rd house has 2 planets transiting through it, Saturn and K2. Saturn is transiting through Libra, its sign of exaltation. And in his birth chart, you'll notice he has natal Saturn in Libra. And when this event happened, he was 30 years old, which was his first Saturn return, in which there can be a very big change going on in an individual's life. The other thing to note here is Saturn is at 29 degrees, sitting on the house cusp. Saturn rules the 6th and 7th house, so this activated the 6th and 7th house, the house of work and the house of his business relationships. Saturn is also going to change signs, and the very next day, it actually moved into Scorpio. Remember also that at 29 degrees, Saturn is considered what's called Sandy or Sandhi. The planet doesn't have a lot of strength. It's considered weak because it's at a junction between states. There can be a lot of instability, uncertainty, and quite frankly, the planet's not able to express its true energy. There's not a lot of support to the houses that it rules when it's in that very fragile position. So we've got a double whammy here with Saturn being Sandy at 29 degrees, which is also his house cusp. Saturn is in the nakshatra of Vishaka, which is represented by the arch, and it represents triumph, victory, and success. The deities ruling Vishaka are Indra and Agni. Indra is the chief of the gods, representing leadership, the head of things, power, and Agni, it brings the energy of fire. So this is a very goal-oriented nakshatra. Even though this is a downfall for him, somewhere down the line, this is going to change and have a big turnaround. K2 transiting a house will cause detachment and a lot of internalization in the area of that house. In this case, communication, courage, taking initiative. This is also the house of colleagues and teamwork. So very simply here, Saturn that is about structure and K2 dissolves that structure. K2 is in the nakshatra of Swati and it's in Pada 3, which is the sign of Aquarius. And Aquarius for a Leo rising is the 7th house. It also sits 5 houses from where K2 is transiting. And really this is about other people disrupting his creative control. The 4th house is going to impact where you sit. The ruler of the 4th house is Mars. It's transiting the 1st and it's aspecting the 4th. So again, he was stripped of his seat. Let's move to the 5th house. And remember what I initially said about the 5th house. It is 8 houses away from the 10th house. In this case, the ruler of the 5th is a debilitated retrograde Jupiter in the 6th house, letting us know this is a downfall. It's also further impacted by Saturn's 3rd aspect, which is one of conflict. It's also 9th aspected from Rahu, which is about turning over the existing structures and beliefs. This debilitated retrograde Jupiter is in the nakshatra of Shravana, ruled by the moon, and it's in the Navamsha of Taurus, as we can see here, which is actually the 10th house ruler. We see the ruler of the 6th and 7th house is transiting with the K2 and the 3rd, showing dissolution of organizational frameworks. We also see the 8th house ruler is debilitated in the 6th, and Mars is aspecting his 8th house. And if you recall, Mars's 8th aspect is the most challenging and troublesome. Rahu transiting the 9th can create dissatisfaction with long-standing systems. So even though the 9th house is luck, in this case, it's important to remember that Rahu is Maya and illusion, and it's like the rug being pulled out under him. It can actually destabilize the bigger narrative of where you thought your life was headed. And in a job loss period, it's not just questioning the job, but it's actually questioning the entire foundation and direction and belief system it was laid on. Rahu is in the nakshatra of Bharani or Bharani, ruled by Venus, which is in the Navamsha of Pisces, as you can see here. The 10th house ruler is Venus in the 12th. And Venus is at 29 degrees on the house cusp. So this not just only points to job loss, but specifically creative control. A debilitated and retrograde Jupiter aspects the 10th house. The Lord of the 11th, Mercury, is sitting in the 1st with Mars, aspected by Rahu. This intensifies the agitation, the reactive decision-making, creating impulsive actions and conflicts within networks and strained relationships. And lastly, Venus sits in the 12th house. Venus is at 29 degrees on the house cusp, shaking things up even more. And Venus is in the nakshatra of Ashleisha in the Navamsha of Pisces, which is the 8th house. The Lord of the 12th is the moon. It's aspected by the debilitated Jupiter. And the 12th house is also aspected by Saturn. So that's the analysis from the Lagna. And as you can see, the major culprits here are Saturn at 29 degrees on the house cusp, Venus at 29 degrees on the house cusp, and the debilitated and retrograde Jupiter. Now let's look at the transits from his natal moon. This is Chandra Lagna. And the reason we like to do this is what's called confluence. So we can see patterns that convince us of the event. His natal moon is in Pisces. The Lord of Pisces is that transiting debilitated Jupiter. And this is the Jupiter that's retrograde and debilitated in the 11th house. This is not going to help with guidance and protection and advice from his professional network. We also have the sun and the moon aspecting Chandra Lagna from the 7th house, indicating there's going to be challenges and problems from those who oppose him. Also note, Mars from the 6th house is giving an 8th house aspect to Chandra Lagna. Rahu in the 2nd house will cause disruption and sense of security, and its ruler Mars is in 6th with Mercury, showing financial stability was impacted by birth. The ruler of the 2nd and the 4th house is in the 6th, where the disruption is stemming from. And these were people he knew because the 6th house is the house of open enemies, which really impacted his emotional sense of foundation. We see the 5th house is aspected by the debilitated and retrograde Jupiter. from the 11th house. Its ruler is in the 7th house, and the 7th house is aspected by the same debilitated Jupiter. The Paravatana Yoga is now occurring between the 6th and the 7th house, indicating his position was impacted by authority outside of himself. Saturn and Ketu in the 8th disrupts his balance with others and major internal change to how he is establishing himself. From Chandra Lagna, since this is in the 8th house, it's like life is forcing you to surrender an old version of yourself so there can be some sort of rebirth. The 10th Lord is that debilitated and retrograde Jupiter in the 11th house. The 10th house is aspected by Saturn. The 12th house is aspected directly by Mars and Mercury, transiting in the 6th, and the 11th and 12th house ruler is in the 8th with Ketu. So again, we see here the major disruptors are Saturn at 29 degrees on the house cusp. From the Lagna, this rules the 6th and the 7th house. From the moon, it rules the 11th and 12th house. The other culprit here is the debilitated retrograde Jupiter. From the Lagna is Lord of the 5th and the 8th. From Chandra Lagna, it's Lord of the 10th and the 1st. So that's a wrap looking at this event. When we look at job loss through the lens of Jyotish, you can see it's not caused by one placement. What we usually see is a confluence of factors: difficult dashas, significant transits, activation of key house cusps, and pressure on houses connected to identity, career, stability, and support. I hope this was helpful in understanding the concept behind job dismissal, as well as being able to view it in different ways in Parashara's light so you can be the best astrologer for yourself and for your clients. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.